Hello everyone, welcome. I feel like it's pretty appropriate that we're back here in like a warehouse situation since we're talking about SQEP today. My name is Allie Truong. I'm the content coordinator here at Supply Pike, and this is the wonderful Ryan Petty. Couple housekeeping things before we get started. We're going to be picking up a question card. If you guys have them, they're at the table, so you can write your questions. We'll have a Q&A portion after we talk a little bit about SQEP and what that means. Other than that, make sure you all have drinks because it's a tad warm in here. But I think we can go ahead and get started. Sweet. All right, before we begin, I want to introduce Ryan Petty. So Ryan he is the senior developer here at Supply Pike. He has been working on supply chain software for 6 years, but has had product development work for quite a long time in the medical industry as well. Besides work, he is the guy to go to for Arkansas sports history and backpacking. So after
single?
He's not single. He's a new dad, so we're really appreciative that he is here today. But with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Yeah. So I'm going to start with a very serious question, Ryan. How do you pronounce SQEP, Supplier Quality Excellence?
This is actually the first time I've heard of that. Was I supposed to know something? I don't know. You know, it's SQEP, SQEP. So many acronyms that Walmart throws at us. That official, so I don't have to remember another way to say it. Just rolls off the tongue. SQEP. Yeah, let's do that.
All right, it's SQEP, so Supplier Quality Excellence Program. And Ryan, can you give us a little bit of the origin story? Why is Walmart implementing this program?
Yeah, well, I think that it is probably a similar background to the OTIF program, which is another compliance program that Walmart's had for years. And you know, you can read Walmart's comments, and they are trying to reduce their supply chain cost, and they're trying to get product onto shelves in a faster and more efficient ways. They want to let fewer touches, fewer sort of failure points, and created to do a lot of these other. And any sort of point of failure can throw everything off. And so Walmart created this supplier quality excellence program to kind of grade, measure, and improve all those other parts of the replenishment process. And we'll talk through the whole gamut of everything that covers, but you know, it really is a lot of everything that OTIF didn't already cover. So they're similar, they're both compliance programs, but they kind of grade different parts of that overall process. But yeah, Walmart wants to reduce costs. They want to keep their prices low, their item prices low, everyday low cost. And you know, this is their way to try to initiate that. And of course, if you don't meet those requirements, they've sort of given you the stick outcome of fines to try to drive you to, you know, achieve those goals if you want to be in Walmart and sell in their stores. So hopefully that's a decent recap for anybody who hadn't heard about all that.
Yeah, that was great. And Ryan, could you break down the different phases? So we are currently in phases 1 through 3, but there are a total of 4 phases. Could you talk us through those?
Yeah, I feel like it's like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like they're just, you know, building and building and building until it's going to be some civil war or something. Yeah, so SQEP was implemented sort of over phases. So they kind of gave you the idea of what was coming, and then they turned them on at different times. And so this has been happening for the last year and a half. And it started out with PO accuracy, where they are grading you on, you know, one, are you sending ASNs? Are you, you know, informing Walmart of what's being shipped to their DCs? And then secondly, you know, when they get the product, does your quantity match what you said you shipped to them? And we all know about shortages and OTIF and being not in full. SQEP was really, the first time where they were really sort of keying in on overages. So if you send too many cases, they're going to fine you for that. And there are other sort of defects that you can get out of phase one. Like if you send them an item that's not on your invoice, then that's another possible sort of hit or ding. So that's all phase one is PO accuracy, shipping what you say you shipped, and also just giving them that sort of ASN confirmation of what's being sent to them. So that's phase one. That's been implemented the longest. Phase two introduced barcoding and labeling compliance. So, everything, all the stickers and your barcodes, making sure that you have item descriptions on every sort of I dotted and T crossed to create that perfect label and barcode. And if you're off, then there are a number of defects. So every single most recent one, and that brought in cases, pallets, and are you shipping them sort of damaged packages? Is everything taped right? Is everything staged here? And we would probably get a defect if Walmart graded this stage right now, sort of hanging off of it. But anything like that, if it's not loaded correctly on the pallet, in the package, in the trailer itself, all of that can lead to SQEP defects. Like I said, it's a gamut from A to Z of everything that you're doing in that fulfillment process that they're grading. So that's phase three. That is also incurring fines at this point. They're issuing fines for that. And then the last one is phase four. They've announced it, but the dates, and curious if anybody's heard differently, I've still seen TBD. They're not sure when they're gonna start to issue those fines, but that's a defect. It's about delivery and appointment compliance, and so, part of that process of routing deliveries, scheduling those things, that's kind of the high level that they've given us about what phase four is going to cover, but not sure yet when it's actually going to happen, but I'm sure it will because it's a compliance requirement and they can fine on it, and they don't seem to be backing down when it comes to these requirements that they're issuing. So yeah, that's the long version of the phases of SQEP.
Thank you for outlining that. I do want to call out, we have all of the details and fines and charges in the SQEP handbook. So we didn't necessarily cover those in detail, but you will find those on the QR code that is on the table out there, as well as on our table with our other items. Going off of that, I've heard a lot of suppliers who are confused if they're exempt from SQEP or if they are included in that. Can you give us kind of a rundown of who's in and who's out?
Yeah, so OTIF is kind of similar, that certain supplier types are affected and part of that program, and then some suppliers are exempt. So SQEP is similar in that regard. If you ship through a USDC on the way to stores, then you're part of SQEP. If you ship e-commerce orders or Walmart.com orders, you're going to be held to SQEP requirements. If you're direct import, in OTIF, you're not part of OTIF, but in SQEP you are. If you're direct import, there's a specific carve out that they don't grade you on ASNs if you're direct import, but the rest you are. So those are kind of some of the main suppliers that are part of SQEP. Some of the ones that are not include DSD suppliers, direct store deliveries, DSDC, DSV, all the acronyms. Those are some of the suppliers that are not sort of required to be a part of SQEP and will not face fines at this point. And there are, I think, a few more, so definitely check out the post if you're not sure if you're part of SQEP. And if you are and you're not sure, you're probably getting fined, so you'll find out soon. So.
Thank you for that. There's also some confusion around how SQEP compliance is measured. So we have two calculations. Could you break those down for us as well?
Yes, although there's some math involved. And there's some beers out here. I don't know how it's going to go, but Well, yeah, I'll give you the rundown and you can check our article kind of for the details, but you know, they give you percentage scores on each PO. They count the number of defects that you have. So every little defect that you have, they'll add it up on a PO, and then they'll divide that by the number of lines on that PO, and that's basically your failure rate. And so that helps you calculate the score. So if it's a 5% failure rate, then you're at a 95% score on that PO for that set of requirements. So like I said, it's a little bit of math. It might be easier to read through that. But yeah, they're counting defects, every single defect that they find, and then sort of dividing that by the number of lines. The fine sort of calculation differs, of course. Nothing's ever, you know, simple and straightforward, but it depends on the defect type. So an ASN, for example, is a $200 flat fee, and that's it. With other defect types, sometimes you have a $200 flat fee plus $1 per case that is not compliant. So it can kind of add up to however many cases were bad. And I guess it's a good time to mention that Walmart has both manual and automated ways of catching some of these defects. And that $200 sort of flat fee on some of their defects has to do with the manual identification, because they have people who are sampling boxes and cases and packages to see if there's an issue. And if there is, then they'll charge you that $200 overhead for paying somebody to, you know, find this issue, and then plus the dollar per case. But automated is a little bit different. Some of their DCs, like the new one out in California, have a lot of technology to scan packages as they come in. And if that's happening and there's issues found with that, then you don't have the $200 sort of overhead fee. It's just the cases that were bad, $1 per case. So yeah, like I said, different rules for different defects. We have all the details kind of on our articles, and so hopefully that's an idea of sort of how they charge. OTIF is very, you know, percentage based. SQEP is much more sort of flat fees that sort of add up in their fee types.
Yes, and I would like to add, depending on the phase, your fine is going to look a little bit different. So there are some, like you mentioned, the ASN fee is just a flat 200, but there's fun little things that are in there, which is like you've got your $1 multiplier all the way up to 4, and I believe there are some other, 20. I knew there was a big cash prize fine on there, so yeah, it can get pretty unruly. So we have all those outlined, but that's just a quick overview. Now, Ryan, where are some of these fines posted, and how do they get distributed to suppliers? Are they more like a deduction? Are they more like an OTIF fine? What does that look like?
Yeah, so there's a few different places you can go to see SQEP information across Retail Link. Of course, you know, it's always spread out. But their SQEP dashboard is a pretty good source to find, you know, what you're being charged. So that's probably first spot to go and look to get some visibility into how much you're seeing in terms of fines. That SQEP dashboard inside Retail Link. There's another app that's Walmart's AR portal where they post all of their AR invoices and fines called HighRadius, which is outside of Retail Link, has its own login. So the actual invoice documents get posted to HighRadius. So if you want to see the PDF of the sort of fine, that's where you go. But if you really want the data of what's causing that charge, SQEP dashboard is where you want to go to see that information.
Yes, and just to reiterate, the SQEP dashboard is in Retail Link. HighRadius is separate. And then can you also talk about another fun app we get to use for only phase 2 and 3, the Fix-It app? What is that?
Yeah, so and I'm curious if there's any in the audience who has some opinions on this, but Fix-It, so what Walmart's doing when they do all these manual inspections of cases and packages, they're posting the outcomes and especially the defects. When they find an issue, they're going to create a ticket in this Fix-It app inside Retail Link, and they'll post images of, the offending problem, whether it's the barcode or the label or the pallet, whatever it is, all those things that could go wrong. They take images, they sort of attach, the PO and the item information, the relevant information for that defect, and they'll post it in the Fix-It app. And so I believe the idea is to expose the issues to the vendors so that you can see with your own eyes, what happened. And there is some functionality in the app to actually create a type of resolution plan to fix these defects. And this is the part that I'm curious later on, maybe let us know, but I'm not sure if it's actually required. It doesn't seem like you're going to get fined if you don't, post a resolution plan. So I haven't seen a lot of adoption in talking to Walmart suppliers who are actually posting plans of what they're doing to fix the issues. So yeah, you can do it in Fix-It if you want to tell Walmart what you're doing to try to fix these problems, but I just haven't seen a lot of adoption or sort of a requirement to do that. So, but that's the Fix-It app at a short level.
Perfect. So we have 2 in Retail Link and 1 outside, which is High Radius. Now I have a question about the money. Where am I seeing these fines posted? What is the schedule? How do I even know what I owe Walmart for SQEP?
Yeah, so kind of all the billing and is done in High Radius. That's where you'll get those invoices, and their schedule is very similar to OTIF. So if you know when the OTIF fines are posted, it's like 4 weeks after a month ends. That's when the SQEP invoices are posted as well. So like July 28th, I believe it's like the 28th of every month is generally when they're posting those invoices. So get excited for the 28th. You can go out and see your fine and enjoy that. So yeah, every month they're going to hit that schedule, and if you're facing a fine, that's when they'll issue the invoice in High Radius for you to review and maybe even dispute. I don't know if that's a question.
That's exactly my next question. Walmart's official statement is you can't dispute. Actually, their exact words are, in the unlikely event, can suppliers dispute?
Yeah, I think they said, like, in the unlikely event that we're wrong, which I'm sure they're right. They're never off. But yeah, there is a way to dispute, and you can do it in High Radius. So that same portal where you go out to view the invoice document, it's posted on the 28th of each month. That's where you can go to initiate your dispute for these SQEP fines. It's also, coincidentally, the same place you can now dispute OTIF fines as well, all in High Radius. So it's kind of the same process if you've done that for OTIF. And of course, they ask you to supply certain information as a part of that dispute, like the PO number, the defect type, backup documentation to try to sort of, make your case of why that fine is not valid. And again, the backup's going to be different based on the defect type, So if you're getting charged for not sending an ASN, then they're going to want you to attach the ASN document that you sent to them, and maybe even that acknowledgement message that they sent back when they receive an ASN. But in other cases, if it's an overage, for example, you would likely attach shipping documents like a packing list and a bill of lading or proof of delivery, those shipping docs that state, what was actually on that load to Walmart. And so again, different dispute documents based on the defect type, but you can go into High Radius and submit disputes there in that app. And just I usually see resolution time somewhere under 2 weeks, so it's not too bad to wait. Not always, no guarantees here, but that's kind of some of the timelines that we've been seeing.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of piggyback off of what you're saying there. So you've seen some suppliers, part of Brian's job that he does is working with suppliers to see what works and see what doesn't work. What are some of the documentation that you've seen working for suppliers and some of the documentation that's like automatically sent back or rejected?
Yeah, so this is a tough question because we're very much learning about what's sort of successful. I will say probably the number one, I was just looking earlier today, the number one dispute type that I've seen be successful with SQEP and all their defect types has been overages. And it's, you know, we already know that there's some invalid shortages at Walmart. You know, if you've dealt with chargebacks for any period of time, sometimes Walmart issues invalid shortages. So it kind of makes sense that they would potentially do that with overages as well. And so overages has been what I've seen sort of reverse the most. And again, I would say those shipping documents, the packing list that states, you know, what quantity was shipped, you know, signed shipping docs, that's kind of the material that I've seen work the most. And there's a bunch of defect types, and some of you may have disputed and have some others that work for you. So hopefully we can continue to kind of share what we've seen. But so far, yeah, overages seems to be the best ticket to get these disputes won.
I did just want to call out Supplier Wiki. Part of the thing we do is connecting suppliers to other suppliers in terms of sharing the information. So if you guys see something that's working or are having issues, we talk with over 400 suppliers and just want to share, you know, what's the easiest path forward for a lot of these compliance programs. Speaking of compliance programs, you've mentioned overages, which is pretty linked to deductions and OTIF. SQEP is now in this compliance program world. How do these interact? And something I'd love for you to cover is how these fines actually can stack on top of each other.
Yeah, so, you know, everything is graded A to Z, and all of these compliance programs and deductions are separate. A lot of times there's separate teams that are finding the defects and issuing the fines, and so they're not going to care if somebody else is fining you for A and they're measuring C. You know, they're going to grade you and fine you for that at the same time across programs. So, you know, for example, OTIF and SQEP, you can be fined on the same AP deductions as well, because that's a different team. Walmart's accounts payable team can issue those deductions. So they can definitely stack up. And, you know, one thing we see a lot too is you can dispute AP deductions, and a lot of times we see suppliers win those disputes, and then they also have an OTIF charge, but Walmart's not reversing the OTIF charge, they're still leaving that there even though they reversed their shortage deduction. So it's a pain to deal with, I'm sure, as all of you know. So yeah, they can really stack up.
Yes, and it's not all at the same time either. It's, you know, you plug one hole and then you go back and there's another one in your boat. So we feel for suppliers. The last question I wanted to ask before we open it up for questions, so if someone from Supply Pack can go ahead and collect those and bring those up to me, is can you share some best practices in avoiding SQEP fines, but also maybe disputing those?
Maybe start with a prayer. So yeah, there are ways to improve your scores, to reduce fines. It really can happen. You know, the first key is always knowledge. You really have to understand what are the requirements and, you know, where are your performance gaps. And, you know, until you know that, you don't really know how to move the needle to reduce those fines. So, again, I would say you should be monitoring that SQEP dashboard to understand it breaks down your defects. You can even see images of the problems in that SQEP app. So, you know, that's the first step, is sort of know where your gap is, whether it's ASNs or, you know, barcode compliance or whatever it is. Understand where you are sort of falling short in Walmart's eyes. And from there, you kind of have to investigate, okay, is this a legitimate problem based on Walmart's requirements, or is this an invalid fine that they've issued and I need to dispute? So, first step, identify the issue, then try to understand what the cause of that was and if it's legitimate. And if it's legit, then hopefully you can make a change in your packaging process, in your loading process, and your EDI to resolve that. But if it's invalid, then you want to submit that dispute and get your money back, hopefully. So again, you got to watch out for the charges to start, and then really take action from there. And you have to keep watching, because SQEP fines are issued every single month, and things can always go awry. So you kind of have to keep checking, check if your changes made progress and reduce those fines. So yeah, it's not all fun. I know it sounded like it would be fun, but you just keep checking, dig into the data, understand what's happening, and then try to take action on that.
Thank you for that, Ryan. And for those of you who are not too familiar with our products, we help suppliers dispute deductions and then now OTIF fines. For transparency, are we seeing this as something that we could possibly do, or is it looking like something that suppliers will need to manage on their own?
Yeah, so we are researching. There's some researchers in the audience here who are digging into SQEP, and we're trying to understand exactly where are the major pain points with this compliance program. How big of a pain is it? Are you actually spending hours, and are you being fined significantly for this, or is this kind of a small problem that you just sort of pay and deal with? And that's a lot of what we're trying to understand. How big of a pain is this for suppliers? And then secondly, are we in a position to help? So can we help you pull together information? Can we grab it from multiple places and put it together in a way that saves you time or enables you to go out and dispute and recover some of those dollars, or understand the root cause and reduce those fines? So yeah, that's just some of what how we're digging into it. So there's a very good possibility. Obviously, we help suppliers with OTIF compliance, and we're closely digging into SQEP to try to figure out if we can help with SQEP as well.
Perfect, thank you. We're going to jump into the Q&A section, so we're going to try and get through all of these questions, but if not, we'll be following up with you guys. I've heard that OTIF fines don't overlap SQEP, but how? I can give you some more context. For in-full failure, you could get fined. Now, overages mismatch on PO quantities. Would that result in a SQEP fine? You can also read the question if it's helpful.
Yeah, so you can double up on fines, and it's not exactly the same thing, but for instance, if Walmart's receiving your pallet and you've got 20 items on this PO across multiple pallets, if they misidentify one of your items and say, well, we received actually 10 extra cases of item A and we didn't receive 10 cases on item B, then now you have a not in full fine for one item and you have an overage on the other item because they potentially, misidentified that first, that item while they were counting. So it's not exactly the same, failure outcome, but they can kind of sort of double up in tandem to where, they're related. But technically, they're not fining you for the same reason, but it can sort of, turn into a multi-headed beast.
Thank you for that. Next question is, which documents would be needed if I'm a collect shipper and received a defect fine as a result of shipping?
As a result of shipping?
Yes.
So, if you are a collect shipper, then that means Walmart is coming to your facilities to pick up the freight. So one way to fight back, and it could be tedious. We have talked to some suppliers who do it though, and that is, if you have images of your outgoing shipments, you can, and Walmart is picking it up at your facility, you can prove, this package or this pallet was in good quality when we shipped it out and when you picked it up. So if there's damages, that happened on your truck or it happened during the unloading of that at your DC. So that is one way to kind of fight back if you are collect and you're getting damages. And it's tedious to sort of create that process to take images of every outgoing load. But when you add up all the SQEP fines that you may get, suppliers a lot of times are just, being proactive. What can we do to sort of stay ahead of these fines? And so that is one way to do that, to kind of disprove that damage and who was actually at fault.
Thank you for that, Ryan. And for this question, I believe they're asking about, does produce, meat, fresh areas, does that fit into the SQEP criteria?
Somebody help me out here. I know there's a department or two that may be excluded from SQEP. Anybody recall offhand if fresh foods?
I believe, that fly got me. I believe direct to store, so if they're shipping direct to store, that would be the exempt, but if you're not, I would say you're in unless you are one of those, another fun acronym, DSDC, those types of shipping methods.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
I concur.
Okay, I'm glad we're in agreement. Next question, do you know anything about the new Collect Freight Fine program? I believe they're referring to the Collect Pickup program, and how will this play into SQEP and OTIF?
Yeah, so tough couple weeks to be a collect supplier with some of these news that came out, but Walmart introduced a freight collect program for all their collect suppliers. There's a little bit of time to take some action before they are going to start to, roll this out live and start issuing charges. But the very sort of high level of it is they're basically passing on the cost of transportation. And again, if you're collect, Walmart's coming to pick up the freight. So now they are creating a transportation charge that they will be issuing to you. I believe they will basically keep track of it throughout the month and issue it after month's end. The charges are broken into two parts. So one is based on fuel prices, and they use a third-party service. I think it's called like Breakthrough Fuel or something like that. They are, in theory, they're basically looking at the lanes that these carriers are driving. They're seeing, the mileage count. They're seeing the fuel prices in that area, and your actual collect shipments, and calculating that as a fuel charge, and for every single delivery. So that's one half of it. The other half is they're also going to just sort of charge a general freight charge, and that is going to be a percentage of the COGS of what Walmart has paid you for your goods, a percentage of those COGS for each department every month. So if OTIF fine sort of structure, OTIF is 3% of your COGS. That's what an OTIF fine is. This is kind of similar, except it's all your collect shipments. It's all the goods that they bought via collect. They'll take a percentage of that for each department, and that will be your freight charge for that month, however much you sort of sold goods to them that month. And it varies pretty significantly across the departments. Like it goes from like 0.4% to I believe like 3 or 4+%. So, and the other thing is it can change every single month. They basically said these are not necessarily going to stick, these percentages. They have the ability to change them. So it's really hard to kind of look out in advance and estimate, okay, what is this going to cost me over the year or beyond, because you don't know if they're going to change that price. So it's sort of a turbulent time for collect side, they did sort of, give a suggestion of if you want to change to prepaid, you can do that before, I believe, August 1st, which is like 2 weeks from now. Probably not enough time to spin up a transportation plan and logistics plan and work with third parties to do that. But obviously, if you want to avoid all these collect charges, that's really your only option is to move to prepaid. And there's a lot of pros, cons to prepaid versus collect that we could talk about for hours, but we'd probably rather drink beer, so I'll stop there.
And thank you for that, Ryan. We have posted an article kind of thinking through what next steps suppliers should take with the collect pickup program, as well as those cost of good charges. Really feel for the fabric and crafts. I think it's a 5%, almost 6%. So hopefully none of you are in fabrics or crafts. And I'm going to end with this last question, and I'll go ahead and take it. Will there be any online training? Yes. So Supplier Wiki, we do lots of things like this event you're at here today. We'll be continuing to do those into the summer and fall. We've got a lot of fun things planned for you guys. But we also write articles. We do webinars. We're doing one on Shipping 101. So you can drink beer today and then talk about collect and prepaid like on next Tuesday or something. So we have a lot of resources, and please, if you have my contact information personally, I will make sure the topics that suppliers are most interested in are getting researched and developed, and there's easy access for that information. Other than that, we're going to close out today's educational portion. Just a couple housekeeping things. Spice Shuttle, we have a tab there so you can get food. We're going to have a tab at Bike Rack. I think until 6 or 7, so just enjoy, network, make sure you get some of our awesome swag at the different tables, and we've got lots of educational resources sprinkled throughout. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Ryan, for walking us through SQEP, and we'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much.